Ladies and gentlemen, Section 4 of our manifesto touches on democracy. Specifically, it has been proposed that the Elections Department of Singapore and the Electoral Boundaries Review Committee, which ensures the impartiality of parliamentary elections, should not report to the Prime Minister's office, and that the ELD should be overseen by a multi-partisan parliamentary committee. Our manifesto also touches on GRCs. Specifically, it proposes for the abolition of GRCs. Jenn Jong, or JJ, as you are known to friends, you are contesting your 4th general election. The first time in Judicial SMC and twice in Marine Parade GRC. And you are probably the best person here today to share your views on our Workers' Party position on EBRC and the abolition of GRC system. Perhaps you can share with us your views and take us through this.
Thank you, Dennis. Yeah, so as you mentioned, this is my 4th election. I'm looking forward to it. Now, one of the things that I've been very concerned about, even long before I joined the Workers' Party, was that Singapore needs a more resilient form of democratic system to ensure our long-term survivability. Now, when I was in Parliament, I remember one of the issues that I raised was regarding this EBRC thing. And I share the sentiments that Dennis have, that this EBRC should not report to the Prime Minister's office, who has a very big vested interest in the elections itself. It should report to a multi-partisan parliamentary committee, for example. We know that boundaries do change from time to time. It's necessitated by demographics and population changes. However, my issue is that, number one, does it have to be that once you release a report and you call elections so soon, and in this case about 2 months later, there should be a minimum time period before elections can be held effective from the EBRC changes. Now, the reason is because, think about it, Singaporeans would need the time to understand the MPs in the constituency that they have suddenly moved to. So take, for example, myself, I moved to a new constituency 3 times, in the last 4 elections. So obviously there'll be a new team of MPs. If I'm a resident, I will need to know who are these people. They're going to be serving me for the next 5 years. Then there'll be teams that are interested to come in. It should give residents the time to get to know these people as well, to be fair. So that's one. So the next point that I have to make is about the GRC system. Now, the EBRC and the GRC system taken together gives the ruling party a very big advantage in how they want to control the processes to their advantage. Firstly, with a short timeline and sudden boundary changes. And you have this GRC, which it started as a 3-man GRC and it grew to 6 men before today, settling at between 4 to 5 men per GRC. And these are a lot of changes that takes place, and it gives the other teams a very short time to react to situations like this. Now, the GRC system has been said that it is there to give representation for minority races. We have seen in both parliamentary elections as well as the most recent presidential election that minorities can actually hold their own and win against the majority race Chinese. So just take President Taman, for example. He won 70% of the popular votes against 2 Chinese.
I think it's very heartening to hear from the Workers' Party that there is such, that the trust that the minorities are not just going to look towards their own race to just see, okay, I need somebody who's representing my own race. The issues that I think the minorities face actually can be seen at a nationwide level. So I think that we should actually move beyond this. In time to come, I hope it will be done. And I do think that the minority races will also put forward candidates. And it will go beyond just, because I'm here as a representative of the minorities. As a minority candidate, I think they would also be able to represent the nation's interests and the interests of people from all walks of life, from all races.
Can I add to what Alia said as well? I fully agree with both of you on your points about representation, but I feel like the system for representation itself is a bit flawed. Because first of all, if you do need representation, why do you need them to be overlaid on top of such large GRCs? You know, you used to have 6-man, 5-man GRCs. And secondly, the representation, I believe, is gazetted by the president. So you'll have certain areas that are designated as Indian/others and certain areas designated as Malay. But what is the logic behind this? Because are you saying that there are no Malays in certain areas that if it's designated as an Indian/other? And this is the kind of convoluted system that doesn't really provide transparency to the electorate, and it really causes the electorate to question what are the motives behind having such a complex, GRC system. And in the essence of what the government said, that they're trying to advocate for more minority representation in politics.
When we have the all SMC system, we do not need the NCMP scheme nor the NMP scheme, which the PAP has put in to say that this is basically to ensure that there will be no opposition wipeout, there will be independent voices, they'll be there. Now, this was a legacy of a time when the PAP had absolute or near absolute control of the parliament. Now, if you have an all SMC system, then I'm sure that our democratic processes will be very well contested. We will get good representations from minorities. We will get good representations of people with different views who have to fight on their own merits to be in. And we will not need this NCMP nor NMP schemes anymore.
In our section on accountability and democracy, we have quite a number of points relating to judicial oversight. So, Alia, as a lawyer, would you like to share your views on any particular manifesto point relating to judicial oversight?
Sure. So I will be quite different from JJ in that I'm very new and JJ has been very experienced. So I will focus, I think, in particular on two topics that stood out to me. And I think something that a lot of Singaporeans want to think about. The first one is the legislation on the Foreign Interference Countermeasures Act, FICA, and the Protection from Online Falsehoods and Manipulation Act, or POFMA. I think that's a word that we see a lot, right? It's a topic that is not just interesting to lawyers. I think it's interesting to Singaporeans as a whole. And one thing that stands out is that under these two acts, the ministers are granted significant discretionary powers to determine whether there's been a contravention of the law. And as I understand it, when I was watching the parliamentary debates, summarily it's because there's a need for expediency, especially for POFMA, and to take down anything that can be seen as a falsehood and to prevent it from being spread in that short time. So the reason given on why it's different from other statutes where the courts decide whether there's been a contravention is, as I understand it, is just based on expediency, because apparently courts do not move fast enough to catch up and to stop this contravention. And the Workers' Party has discussed this at length, but I think what we want to talk about now is the process of appeal, the appeal process. Where there's been a contravention of, let me just take POFMA, where there's been a contravention and where the party has had a correction notice imposed on them, they want to appeal it, they can go to the court, but under the relevant legislation, the circumstances where they can actually go to the court is very, very limited. If I can just read out what the law says. The High Court can set aside the directions based on these three reasons. 1, the person didn't communicate in Singapore, the subject statement. 2, the subject statement is not a statement of fact or is a true statement of fact. And 3, it is not technically possible to comply with the direction. But that means that the Act doesn't allow the appeals to go to the court on reasons of substance. So for instance, the plaintiff, I don't know what to call them, the person on whom the direction order has been imposed cannot go to the court and say, I don't agree with this for reasons of substance. And I think that needs to change. I think that the courts should be given the discretion to hear these appeals, because right now the process is that the minister that makes the direction is also the minister that listens to the appeal. So there needs to be like a delineation and objectivity. And I think that this is where the courts should come in.
And moreover, time is already given for appeal, right? And in the meantime, the order is enforced.
Yes, correct.
So there is very little damage as such.
Yes, correct.
Thank you. And Alia, you used to work as a legal counsel in MAS.
Yes,
Am I
was.
right?
I was part of the legal
Yes.
department.
I'm sure that you, in the course of your work as a legal counsel at MAS, you had to deal with a lot of regulatory related issues. So in the last few years, I think one of the issues that MAS and the banks have been dealing with are actually handling a lot of these online scams affecting the bank accounts or credit card accounts of many Singaporeans. So do you have any views on how you think we can improve our current protection against such scams?
I think scams are something that is also very close to the heart of Singaporeans. And we read, articles where there's a variety of scams, right? Like credit card scams, love scams. But what I feel the public wants and what we actually need is more protection for consumers. So right now there is a shared responsibility framework that MAS has adopted, but the bargaining positions in respect of the banks or the telcos and the tech platforms are stronger than for the customers. So usually it's the customers who will bear the burden of the scam-related losses. And I think that more can be done to enhance this. So for instance, the service providers can increase their vigilance with proactive steps such as deploying artificial intelligence to recognize unusual transactions. The other thing that I think would be something that we need to think about is an insurance scheme to cover losses from scams with a consumer liability cap of up to $500. Insurance schemes would not be a new thing. I have seen recently that there have been some private insurance companies that have introduced digital scam protection schemes, but these are private schemes. That means consumers would have to sign up themselves and they would be subject to premiums. So if the government introduces an insurance scheme as compared to the private insurance company, then there would be risk pooling and a wider base. And then the cost that would be borne by the consumers would definitely be a lot lesser and it would be minimized. So there would be more protection for consumers, something that I think a lot of Singaporeans are thinking about.
And if you enforce it at the national level, rather than leaving it to the individual, it is a better protection for a larger number of people across the board. You know how it is with insurance. Sometimes people look at the premium price and they'll be like,
and they just get turned off.
I can't afford that, or I'll save some money here. But then when they get involved, when they are victim of a scam, then they realize, oh, okay, now I don't have the protection. I've lost how much money here.
Yeah, exactly, because a lot of the scam cases or victims of scams, I don't think they think that they're going to be subject to scams, right? So to sign up for like a private insurance digital scam protection scheme means that they have already thought this out, and this is the premium that they would want to pay out to protect themselves. But that's not how scams work. I mean, that's exactly why scams are so dangerous.
Maybe I can add a bit more to what you shared, Dennis. I think the discourse around scams, right, is that it is the victim's fault. It is the onus is on them to be prudent and be careful around not being scammed. But I think there is little bit of it. But I think our focus, as a government, as a society, right, should really be to afford protections to a wide, as you say, a wide class of people. And scams themselves are very complex. They're very sophisticated. They've evolved since we first saw the very high-profile scams relating to a big multinational bank in Singapore. They've evolved to now, using deepfake images, for example, to lure unknowing people into investments. And I think we have to evolve with the times as well, and we have to put in place a system that does right by Singaporeans and make sure that the most vulnerable are not susceptible to such scams. And that's just how I think we should evolve as a society.
Yes, I totally agree. I think certainly sharing from the experiences of a lot of my residents who come to see me, and they feel helpless sometimes. Many times they feel helpless against the banks, and they feel that they keep trying to ask the bank, but there's a pushback. Of course, we understand because the banks are also bearing losses, and so it would be good if the government can actually assist individuals to actually protect their position, for example, the insurance scheme, or in fact to also assist individuals in their communication with the banks, when there is a pushback, for example. As I've said, our section on accountability and democracy actually covers a wide range of topics and issues. And actually one big chunk here, very important issues in the last couple of years, is the issue of climate change, environment. And Nathaniel, you were at one time a policy team lead with our Workers' Party, focusing on environment. So, and we have known each other for quite a number of years, and you have 2 children, young children, and I sometimes see you in your private social media where you and your wife will bring your children to nature areas, right? Can you share a little bit more about it and why you like doing this?
Yeah, so as you said, rightfully said, we know each other for quite a number of years already, and I have 2 young children, 2 sons. One is 5 years old and one is 1 year old. And my wife and I love to bring them to nature areas, the forested areas,
example?
even botanic gardens, the nearby parks, and Sungai Buloh. We just appreciate nature around our HDB estate. And my son, my 5-year-old son, he has been learning the names of the various species of flowers and plants, the scientific names even. So I'm very impressed with that. And it's not just the aesthetic nature of the environment that we want to appreciate. As you know, Singapore is developing very fast, right? A lot of development works coming up here and there. We want to ensure that nature is not being destroyed. And how do we make better policy decisions from these development works? How about putting a dollar value to nature? You might think that it is incredulous. Now, how can you put a dollar value to nature? But there is existing accounting standards by the United Nations, by the European Union to account for natural capital. Right? So why don't we do that? For example, if we want to develop on a forested area or a wetland, how much in dollar value would we lose if we decide to build over it? Or can we invest in it? How much can we gain from investing in keeping this wetland or forested area? So why not consider natural capital accounting in our environmental policies?
Yes, that's very interesting. So what should we consider if we want to build over a wetland?
Yep. So apart from dollar value, which is I think will be a very good thing to have, we must also consider the actual environmental impact. How much how many species of plants and animals would we lose if we develop over a wetland or forested area? So we have something called environmental impact assessments, right? And currently the government has done environmental impact assessments for certain projects, like the Cross Island Line, like certain housing projects in Tengah, for example. But it shouldn't be simply a recommendation or a guidance. It should be, I feel it should be enshrined into law. It should be mandatory, not simply a recommendation.
Still on climate change and environment, right? there are times where I notice some of these advertisements where they are, they basically advertising that certain products, they are environmentally friendly, their products can save the earth. How can we believe them? Are they really true?
As consumers now are becoming more environmentally friendly, businesses will want to market their products as environmentally friendly. And while currently it is the onus on the consumers to report such advertisements to the Consumers Association, and it requires lay people like us to proactively report it to the Consumers Association, which is a bit of a barrier to entry. Yeah, so why not government agencies proactively work with civil society groups to monitor and to highlight such greenwashing cases, whether this greenwashing is intentional or unintentional, so that we can take a more proactive approach to prevent consumers from being misled.
So, now we do a lot of these using of solar energy to convert to electricity, for example. So I'm going to ask Nat, we get most of our electricity currently from natural gas. How can we reduce our dependence on non-renewables?
I think one of the things that we have to target is to be a bit more ambitious in our targets towards generating electricity through renewable energy. As we all know, Singapore is small. We are constrained and limited by our
land size.
By our land size, and that constrains how much electricity we can generate with renewable energy. But one of the things that we have been doing is to import electricity from renewable energy from our neighboring countries. Currently, we have a target of 30% of electricity generated from renewable energies by 2035. And I think we can be a bit more ambitious with a bit more motivation. We can bring that target forward. So we look at our neighboring countries, for example. For Malaysia, they have a target of 31% by this year, by 2025. And for Philippines, 35% by 2030. So I think Singapore, for us, this country, we can do it with a bit more ambition, with a bit more motivation. How about perhaps bringing forward the target of from 30% in 2035 to 30% in 5 years' time, 2030. I think with enough drive, we can do it.
Yes, we certainly need to do more. Jackson, I have a question for you because I know you feel very strongly about this. Can you share with us what are your views about the Freedom of Information Act? Why is this so important to you?
Sure. Firstly, maybe I'll put the disclaimer out there that I've worked in communications for over a decade. I've worked with a lot of financial services companies. I've worked with a lot of consulting firms. I've worked with a lot of clients. And I think the common thread that runs through all the work that I've done is that information helps to combat misinformation and disinformation. And freedom of information is important for growing democracy like Singapore. The plain answer is that in Singapore right now, you cannot request information from public agencies if you wanted to. There's no formal process of doing it. And this is, I feel, an area that we should improve on because information is essential. It helps various groups, civil society, academia, even private citizens themselves. They can make official requests for information that will help to empower them and give them more impetus to decide on whether government policy is accurate or government policy is moving in the right direction. What you find, at least in the last term of government, you find that the government is forthcoming with some data, but it's not in other aspects. So a good example of this that I can look at is jobs data, periodically released by the Ministry of Manpower. The MOM seems to have a habit of conflating jobs data for residents instead of spreading it out across Singapore citizens and permanent residents, for example. So this just leads to difficulty for private citizens to make assertions on their own on how exactly jobs growth is benefiting Singaporeans. And this is just one example of the many times the Workers' Party has asked for data from the government. And again, in the last term of government, I do believe there have been many incidents where we have respectfully asked for data to aid in our policy-making efforts, but we've been questioned as to the intent of why we're asking for this data. And I feel like we really should change the narrative and change the way we approach information, because information helps to combat disinformation.
So we should really change our mindset, right? That it should be open and transparent. The information should be made available instead of having a very defensive attitude of why do you need this information?
Yeah, right? I mean, I can add to that because when I was in Parliament 2011 to 2015, there were a few issues that I wanted to follow up very closely with. Is in early childhood, for example, I wanted to propose major policy changes, but I need a lot of data which is not available. So of course I got to find many ways around to asking it, many PQs, and then doing my own research sometimes. But I feel this is also unproductive because here I am trying to figure out how best to suggest policies, and I need data. So, but of course, eventually I got to that. I remember that even the one of the issues that I pushed for about student care for every primary school, I had to call many centers myself to find out what is their vacancy, and everyone told me, sorry, we're all totally full. Then I have to go back with this data to the Ministry of Education and says, you only have that few student care in primary schools, right? But you say that you are not going to have one for every primary school. But tell me which primary school will not need. Every primary school will need it because we are already spending so much effort on childcare. The next thing people will need is student care. So, well, I'm thankful that 2 years later, after they said no to me, they eventually overturned that policy, and now they have student care in every primary school. But that data collection was very tedious because it's not available. A lot of things are not available. I had to manually go down and to the ground and get the data myself.
You're absolutely right, JJ. And I think beyond the tedium of collating this information for yourself, right? And maybe Dennis, I'd love to hear your opinion on this as an incumbent parliamentarian. But there's this catch-22 situation where without adequate information, without adequate access to information, we cannot bring forward the right policies properly and appropriately in Parliament. And we have this situation where we're criticized for not bringing the right policy to Parliament, but we don't have access to the data. So it just feels like it would help Singaporean discourse, it will help Singaporeans in general to have access to more information so that they can make their own assertions, make their own considerations on what the fact of the matter is. And maybe you have your own experience, Dennis, of requesting such data from Parliament.
No, I think certainly as an MP, as a parliamentarian, we are allowed to file parliamentary question, oral and written. We do file question asking for data on different issues. We do that quite routinely. Every month we are doing that. I would say that most of the time information is provided. Sometimes the information provided may not be to the extent that we requested for various reasons. But that is, I'm speaking from a position of privilege as an MP. And I think JJ will agree with me that, but you see, even imagine for all Singaporeans, common Singaporeans, how are they going to find this data? So it's important that in this day and age, we make such data available. And that's the next thing I want to ask you. So, of course, with information comes responsibility, right? So what do you think are the safeguards that we should put in place should such a law come into place?
I think I agree with the sentiment that we shouldn't have a carte blanche approach to, just showing everything and under the hood. I do think that there could be some controls in place. So, for instance, for government documents, they could have different classifications, like top secret, secret, classified, and we could weigh the pros and cons of dispersing this information. So I think that's one approach we can do it. Another way we can look into making sure that people have meaningful and appropriate access to information is to have an independent panel oversee the process of soliciting information. People can put in a request and say, hey, I am so-and-so and I would like to know information about classrooms, as JJ mentioned, and student care. So they could make this request, and there could be a process where someone from a public agency can say, we have noted that so many people have a keen interest in this particular area. Perhaps we can put out information that would help in their decision making.
The government should not adopt the mindset that, we are out here to create trouble for them, because many times we do genuinely want to offer suggestions from a different perspective to improve certain policies, but we don't get access. Unlike some countries where the oppositions actually get access to government departments. So, for example, for the PAP, they have the government parliamentary committees. The MPs would get briefed by the ministries and all that. So we need that kind of access. I feel that Singapore, to progress to a more resilient democratic system, must shake up this mindset that, oppositions are bad, it will destroy the country. Look, we are also here as loyal opposition, trying to figure out how best to offer suggestions. So I feel that openness in sharing information or even access to briefings by ministries should be also accorded to opposition.
Equally, right?
Yeah,
yes,
equally.
I totally agree. Yes. Jackson, you have also spoken about lowering the voting age to 18. Why is this so important to you?
Well, I think among us, I am the youngest, but I sadly don't really have a baby face. I have quite an old face. Every time I see Pritam, he has told me, Jackson, you look quite old, you look quite tired. But I'll take it as it is. My views are quite simple about this. The future belongs to the young, which is why you need to get them invested very early in this process of understanding how democracy works and being a stakeholder of their future. And what better way to do this than to reduce the voting age to 18, which is, I would say, an appropriate age for most young people. And I say this because young people, when they're 18, they can be legally tried as adults. They are expected to start their national service or at least serve their national service. They can drive a car, they can marry, they can be directors in a company. So if we afford this trust to them to do all these things, why do we then say superficially that actually you can do all these things, but you're not mature enough to vote. You have to wait another 3 years till you're 21. So I find that very confusing. And I'd love to hear your thoughts as well, Nat, on this, because you were once the youth wing president. Maybe you have some insight to share on this.
Recently, I was on an outreach, and there was a new volunteer. It's a mother-daughter pair. I spoke to both of them. I spoke to the daughter. She's 20 years old, not yet old enough to vote in our current system. And she's interested in politics. I asked her, when did she start being interested in politics? And she said when she was in secondary school. And throughout her secondary school up till now, she's waiting to go to a university. She has been having robust debates with her friends who are her age. So I also asked her, did you bring your mother here or your mother bring you to the outreach? She said she brought her mother to the outreach, which sort of reminds me of my own story as well. But anyway, so if she at 20 years old or even before 20 years old can have such robust debates with her fellow 18, 19, 20-year-old peers, imagine how much more discourse we can have if we lower the voting age to 18.
This topic is not the only one that that's been on our manifestos over the years, and we have quite a number of these issues. And of course, we're happy whenever over different parliamentary terms, the government accepts in one version or another our suggestions in our manifestos, and we really hope that the government will rethink this issue as well in the near future. Fellow Singaporeans, we have come to the end of our Hammer Show today. Due to time constraints, we are unable to cover all the issues that we've included in this section of our manifesto. And I do welcome you to look up our website, wp.sg, to find out more of what we have to say in our manifesto. Do join us for our next Hammer Show, and until then, vote for the Workers' Party, working for Singapore. Thank you.
Alia.